talk. My name is Rod Ward, and I'm here to answer 7 questions. So what have you not done yet that you would like to be part of your story included in your eulogy? So I work at CSC. We're headquartered here in Delaware. And part of our missions, values, purpose, a component of that, is that we would like to create an environment where we all are better off tomorrow than we are today. And when we talk about all of us at CSC, we talk about employees, customers, we talk about the communities in which we live and work. And this, what really resonates with me is this idea of continual improvement, making things better, and that's something that I try to strive to do in sort of my daily life. And so if there's a eulogy, hopefully it's years away. Hopefully it's years. But there would be sort of four components. It would be something like, he tried, sometimes he was successful, to make things better, and especially in Delaware. I have strong feelings for our first state. Today, as Bill said, the proceeds are going to Eastside Charter School, which is a wonderful school, as the crow flies, a mile and a half from here. And I noticed that Aaron Bass, the head of school, was here this morning, which is great. But if you want an example that's living up to that, making things better in Delaware, it's just a wonderful school doing great things. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about, is Delaware public school education. So really excited about that. How has failure, or apparent failure, set you up for later success? Do you have a favorite failure? Well, there's a long list to choose from. But I started my career in New York City, working in finance, and wanted to work for a company that made something and get involved in, and I really felt manufacturing. So I ended up going back to graduate school, and then a few years later, I ended up in my first real assignment that was attached to a manufacturing operation, and that was down in Conway, Arkansas. And so I was very, very excited about that, and it sort of was a big ambition of mine. And then a stark reality hit, and somewhat like if you always wanted to be a surgeon, and so you studied hard, you went to medical school, you did your fellowship, you were out there, and then at some point you realized you were afraid of blood. That would be difficult. And it wasn't that dramatic, but I learned that I was really uncomfortable on the manufacturing floor, like down on the shop floor. And it was completely, in my head, and it had to do with a lot of things. My experience wasn't from there. Could I relate to the people that were working on the floor? A whole host of things. And instead of stepping forward and taking that on, I sort of stepped back and said, okay, I'm going to avoid that. And that's not a good plan if your ambition is like to be a general manager of a manufacturing operation. Not a good plan. And so it really was ineffective in a big part of what I did. A couple years later, I was working in Germany, in the town of Funkstadt, which is just south of Frankfurt, again, in a manufacturing operation. And in this case, the plant, the shop floor was across the street. And again, I sort of avoided it, and I chalked it up to, I'm a foreigner, my German skills aren't that good, I've got other things to do, or whatever it might be. And again, it really limited what I was able to do, and really limited my ability to grow as a person. Fortunately, I guess there's 3 strikes. Fortunately, I got a third chance. And when I moved back to the United States to work at the Speakman Company, I wasn't going to let that challenge, I was going to overcome that challenge. It's about time. I was almost 40 years old. But so from day one, when I got to the plant, I parked in back, I walked directly through, I engaged with all the people that worked there. We had about 100 people on the shop floor. I got to know them, I got to know their processes, and obviously it just made a huge difference to our overall success. One funny story early in my tenure at Speakman. It was a spring day. It was a nice day. And we had a special order that had to get out, so we were working the weekends. And so it was Saturday, and I thought I'd go down and check and see how it was going. So I drove down and parked in the back and came up onto the plant, unexpected, I think. And there was Tim washing his car. And he was doing a great job. It looked really good. The only problem was Speakman was paying him time and a half to wash his car. So we resolved all that, and you know, it went on to be very successful. But I guess the lesson there is that, you know, or for me at least, was you got to engage, right? You got to step forward. You got to put yourself, you know, out there, meet people where they are, and ultimately, you know what? It works. You know, it works. And so it took a while to learn that lesson, but a very important one. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life? So at my age, let's call that middle age, early middle age, you know, it's very apparent that a lot of folks are dependent on me, right? My wife and I, our kids are dependent on us as they become adults. My siblings and I, my parents are very dependent on us as they continue to age. There's about 3,100 folks at CSC, a couple here today, that expect me to do my job every day. And so it's just that recognition has made me think about, if you're flying, a lot of us are back to flying, you remember that statement they always say, put your own mask on first before assisting others. And so that's always resonated with me in the sense that you got to take care of yourself, because a lot of people are dependent on you. And if you're incapacitated, if you're not living up to that, then you're letting a lot of people down. So focused a lot of time and attention on sort of physical and mental health for my own oxygen mask. And so that's really focused on habits, that word I picked up from that question, and trying to develop habits, just simple habits about taking care of yourself in terms of exercising. My wife and I try to be more careful what we eat, all those types of things. And what I've realized is, when started, it was for reading, and they said, oh, a habit, when you do something 7 times, you can turn it into a habit. Or I read somewhere else, it takes about 200 days to make that habit. What I missed in the fine print was that's if you're trying to find a new habit, but if you're trying to break an old habit, it's a heck of a lot longer, because it's been taking a lot of time to sort of break those old habits and then develop new ones. And it's a constant struggle. It's something that, you know, you sort of get up every day. But overall, I mean, again, just recognizing that you're doing that for yourself, and you're doing that for those you care about, those you love, and those who you're responsible for. What activities make you lose track of time? So anytime you're learning a new skill, or you're learning or studying and learning about new information, I think we all can lose track of time. And that's certainly the case for me. As an example, you know, COVID, sort of, and these interesting times that we live in, I got very interested in learning more about the Civil War, the US Civil War. And it was sort of on auspicious reasons, because last year they announced at some point later in the year that more people had died from COVID than soldiers killed in the US Civil War, about 620,000 people. And I was like, ooh, that's sort of scary. And then January 6th happened, and the Capitol was raided. I'm like, whoa, they're testing out democracy here. How does that compare to back before the Civil War? And there are the comparisons that we need to be worried about. Fortunately, I don't think we're headed to Civil War. Hooray. But anyway, learned a lot. So I did things like, I went back and I watched Ken Burns' PBS series. That was 1990. That's 30 years ago. That's a while ago. I read a great book on Chernow's new biography on Ulysses S. Grant, which was really impactful. He gets more credit than history maybe gives him, certainly as a president. And then I listened to Shelby Foote's epic, like 3-volume piece on the Civil War. But the reason I tell you that is it's sort of, the great thing about that and time and everything, it opens up new paths, right? Now I'm very interested in, like, okay, Abraham Lincoln, I mean, that guy was just a crazy good leader. What was he doing? The Emancipation Proclamation, and then certainly in this time we live in of social injustice and racial inequality, you know, understanding a little bit more about the history of the U.S. and our history with slavery. You know, there's a great book that I just finished reading, an author named Blight. He's a professor at Yale who wrote a biography of Frederick Douglass. And the interesting fact there is when Frederick Douglass in 1838 escaped from slavery in Eastern Shore of Maryland, he came by train into Wilmington, Delaware. Hooray, not hooray, because if he had been captured, he would have been sent right back to slavery. Fortunately, he got a steamship on to Philadelphia, then to Boston, and eventual freedom. So that leads to this next question. What book do you most often give or recommend, and how has that book influenced you? This is rather easy because if some of you know me and you ask me, I don't recommend a book. I always recommend the Great Courses series from the Teaching Company. And today you can find that streamed or in a podcast, but if you've been around as long as I have, if you're middle-aged like me, you remember when it was like a VHS tape and even a Betamax tape. But anyway, the Teaching Company takes the best professors from from different schools, and they teach their course subjects. And they do it, they break it up, you know, it can be 30 lectures or whatever it might be. And it's just remarkable. If you're like me, you could have paid a little more attention when we were in college, and you get this chance to just sit and hear and now see these great professors just really explain things, and it's really quite interesting. Again, we're in COVID, so the themes that I've been listening to lately, I was just re-listening to great utopian and dystopian literature from a great professor at the University of Connecticut. And they talk about the big 3 dystopias from World War I to World War II. That's like, and we read a lot of these in high school, I think, like George Orwell, 1984, you know, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And then there was Yevgeny Zamyatin, who I think a lot of us haven't read, I haven't, wrote a book called We, which was actually the first one in 22. And what I took away from all that was they were writing these between 2 world wars. In Zamyatin's case, he just lived through a famine and a civil war. And so whether it's fact or fiction, because dystopia is a little scary, you know, things can be a lot worse than they are now. And that it's up to all of us to stay engaged to make sure that doesn't happen. But the other thing great about the Teaching Company and the podcast, if you can't fall asleep, they're great. They really can get you right to sleep. So what have you purchased or been given in the last year valued at under $200 that has most positively impacted your life? So for me, it was a $10 pair of work gloves. And again, sort of COVID related, I think we all are spending a lot more time at home and doing more things around the house. And then we had the added bonus that in August of 2020, a tornado touched down near where I live, knocked down hundreds of trees next to Valley Garden Park, which is a beautiful park, continues to be a beautiful park, but had a lot of trees. Fortunately, no structural damage, but there was a lot of cleanup, and so that prompted the purchase of these work gloves. But there was 3 great things about that purchase. First, we're fortunate in Delaware to have 4 seasons. And it's really great. And when I go other places, I recognize how lucky we are. And so just spending more time outside in the last 2 years on a regular basis, you could really watch those seasons. And it's just remarkable. Number 2, COVID, you know, the only way to the blahs or the blues from COVID is to get out and do something, right? And so that's really wonderful. But the priceless point about these gloves was that my children are spending more time home, which is nice. And I can create unbearable embarrassment about their father because I walk around saying, oh, it's time to go out and work. These gloves sure will come in handy. And I say things like that. It's even better if they have a friend over or something like that. Then it really, and so that is what's made them priceless. So the last question, if you could broadcast a message to everyone in the world, knowing it would be received and remembered, what would it be? So the message would be, stay curious. Stay curious, a very simple message. Because I believe if I get to send this message to everyone in the world and they're going to remember it, you know, I got to go with like a great philosopher, right? Somebody, a great thinker, right? I get one chance. And so, although one of the great ironies of history is that we don't remember history. So anyway, I will go Socrates. And Socrates said, I know that I know nothing. I know that if you want to lose track of time, try to unpack that one. But I know that I know nothing. What that means to me is the following, is that we're on this journey. We're all on this journey. And it's to learn, it's to understand. And the longer that we're on that journey, you realize it's just a bigger journey. Like there's more out there. There's just more complication. Things are always changing. And that you can't let that, you know, turn you into a cynic, right? You can't let that make you step back, as I said earlier. You got to sort of, again, step forward, and you got to say, look, I understand that there's just overwhelming, and that really I know nothing, but going to keep going, and I'm going to learn. I'm going to stay curious through my life. So with that, thank you very much, and I've really enjoyed this grit talk.